My island on June 28, 1947, Captain Tony, who worked as a harbor patrolman officer in Ireland, was on patrol with his 2 rookies, his son, and his dog. However, this was no ordinary day at sea. When Tony gazed up into the sky from his patrol boat, he saw 6 aircraft floating around 1,500 feet above his watercraft. The objects were reported by Tony and his crew to be made of a reflective material and were shaped like flat donuts, about 100 feet in diameter. The center holes located on each craft were noted to be about 25 feet in diameter, and more circular objects were located along the sides of the aircraft, which Tony and his crew determined to be observation windows. Soon, Tony and his fellow crewmen noticed that 5 of the UFOs circled over the 6th, and the 6th itself was lowering towards the patrol boat. This caused immense panic among the crew because they all thought that the aircraft was going to collide with their patrol boat. Not wanting to be sent to a watery grave, the crew hightailed it toward the shore. Upon reaching the shore, Tony retrieved his binoculars to spot the bizarre aircraft from the shore. He also grabbed his camera to take photos as evidence of the strange aircraft. While taking the pictures, the lower craft stayed in a still position while the 5 others circled around it for about 5 minutes. Then, the lower aircraft suddenly dropped down but stopped abruptly at about 500 feet above the water. One of the 5 ships circling around the lower ship came down to meet it. The 2 crafts stayed in this position for several minutes until Tony thought he heard a thump. Instantaneously, more thumps followed, and Tony, using his binoculars, saw that the middle aircraft was dropping what Tony suspected to be newspapers from the inside of its center hole as it swiftly approached his watercraft. When the aircraft got close enough, it was discovered that the objects weren't newspapers but instead white, lightweight metals and black, lava-like rocks. Tony even stated that when the lava-like rocks landed in the sea, it caused the water to steam. With these dangerous pieces of debris falling ever closer to their boat, the crew sought cover below deck. However, not before one of the materials struck Tony's dog, killing it in the process, and another one wounded his son in the arm. Tony even tried to radio for assistance, but the transmitter wasn't functioning. Even though his radio was out of action and no help was on the way, most of the debris splashed into the water. Soon after the raining of metals and rocks, the airships rose up high into the sky and zoomed westward together. The crew then exited the lower deck and examined the boat for any damage. Luckily for the crew, the boat was hardly damaged, and they set sail back to their dock, lowering the dog over the side and into the water in the form of a burial at sea. Upon docking, Tony took his son to the hospital so that his wounds could be treated and afterwards explained the incident to his boss, Mark, who didn't believe Tony. When the photos Tony took of his patrol were printed and examined, the strange airships Tony had informed him of and showed him in the now-developed photos were compared and believed to be film noise and damage caused by radiation. Not wanting to shy away from proving the incident's authenticity, Tony returned to Ireland to collect rock samples in hopes of finding the ones dropped from the middle aircraft that he had encountered during the incident. Tony reported that while he did this, he spotted one of the aircraft hovering above him as if it were spying on him. He eventually gathered the rocks and was preparing to show them to his boss the next day. But when that day came, he was visited by a small, pale man in a black suit. The man suggested that the pair of them should get breakfast together, to which Tony agreed. So, he followed the stranger to a restaurant. While they ate breakfast together, the strange man asked no questions but instead gave a descriptive account about what Tony had witnessed the previous day and eventually warned Tony that bad things would happen not only to him but to his entire family. Men then acknowledged that Tony had been telling the truth. So, the pair of them sent a package to publisher Ray Palmer in Chicago, who later founded Fate magazine. The contents inside the package were the metal fragments and statements about the strange incidents and findings on the 21st and 22nd of June, a noteworthy incident that we continue to discuss and debate amongst ourselves to this day. Yet not even a month later would another incident occur that is possibly the most well-known and talked about alien encounter in history, Roswell. On July 8, 1947, in the small town of Roswell, New Mexico, there were reports of a flying disc that crashed into the desert not far from the Walker Air Base. This made front headlines around the world. The reports noted that bodies of aliens had been retrieved from the crash site and were hauled to the infamous Area 51 Air Base in the Nevada desert, where autopsies were performed and carried out. Shortly afterwards, a press release by high military authorities stated that rumors of a flying saucer had become something of a reality and that an intelligence officer at the Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain and hold possession of one of the saucers. This statement sent newspaper reports of the incident around the world insane, and news headlines of this Roswell flying saucer were everywhere. However, just 24 hours later, that high military authority changed their story, stating that they had made a mistake and that the flying saucer was actually, in fact, a weather balloon. Unbelievably, the public appeared to have accepted this explanation, and very little was said about the Roswell incident for many years afterwards. It wasn't until the late 1970s when some military personnel involved began to speak out about what happened all those years ago, and ufologists, as well as conspiracy theorists, went into overdrive, thus developing the Roswell case into the incident as we know it today. One of the first military personnel to speak out about the Roswell UFO incident was Major Jesse Marcel. He was one of the 2 military personnel sent to investigate the crash site. The other one who was with Major Jesse Marcel was Sheridan Cavett, who had always claimed that he wasn't even there. Major Jesse Marcel described how large amounts of metallic debris were scattered all over the area, so the craft had obviously hit the ground at a high speed. He stated that it was clearly not a weather balloon, aircraft, or missile because he recovered fragments from the crash and described seeing hieroglyphic types of writing painted on it. The metal was also reported by him to be light, thin as paper, but incredibly strong and hard, which was unlike anything he had ever seen in his career and life before. He also helped answer the question as to where the fragments were taken by simply saying not only did they have the one he analyzed but others as well, which are being kept well preserved in a military installation somewhere. Marcel's story doesn't end there, however, because later in life he told his expanding family about his investigation at Roswell. According to his grandson, my grandfather Marcel would privately share details of his experiences with the entire family. And when I was a kid, basically around the dinner table, he told us how he was the head of intelligence and lead investigator of the 509 bombing group. He would talk about it with people, continuously asking a multitude of questions about the Roswell UFO incident. The National Security Agency published a report in 1994, a staggering 47 years after the initial incident, which stated that the alien bodies supposedly recovered from the crash site were, in fact, just life-size test dummies. Many saw this as the government just trying to dig itself out and cover up the situation, which only continued to fuel conspiracy theories. Lots more witnesses came forward and spoke out about the Roswell UFO incident, including a photographer who claims that he was asked if he could photograph the crash site. He explained how he was asked to take photos inside a dark-tinted area, where he observed 4 identical bodies with humongous heads and shadowy skin. After taking the pictures, he was debriefed and ordered to forget everything he noticed at the crash site. But then a witness more credible than everybody else combined spoke out just before he passed away in 2005. His name was Lieutenant Walter Haut, the man who published and released the original weather balloon report back in 1947. Before his passing, he wrote and left a sworn affidavit in which he claimed that the weather balloon story was a cover-up for the UFO that had been successfully recovered from the crash site. He also confirmed that he had seen dead alien bodies in this still widely debated Roswell UFO incident. With these 2 incidents raising so much speculations and questions, one might ask if we will ever know what went on. However, as the years fly by and as the people who were involved or witnessed these incidents pass away, we are really only drifting further away from the inevitable answer. So until the government sheds light on this mystery or the next incident does that for us, we can only continuously marvel at the fact that these 2 instances combined have been not only the gateway to extraterrestrial debates as we know them today, but also might just be the biggest government cover-ups in history regarding human contact with alien and otherworldly beings. Though these 2 events are the most widely renowned encounters with extraterrestrials, Thousands of encounters have been reported throughout the world to the present day. I never told anyone this story because I never thought they would believe me. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I lived with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I worked from 9 to 5, then came home, ate, and then worked on the old house to get it ready to sell. One night, after an exceptionally long and rough night of working on the house, I was on my way home when I saw in the sky something that routinely is not there. I stopped to watch the object only to see it not move at all. Now, realize this is around 1 a.m., and it's not a hot air balloon or anything like that, especially since I have never seen one in my area of Ohio. What I was looking at was an oval. It was wider than it was tall. The object, as many people explained, was not giving off light but was illuminated, if that makes any sense. I was so tired I almost wanted to shrug it off, but I just couldn't for some reason. Not only was it way too bizarre, but what I had been wanting for the last 48 years was happening right before me, my first and so far only UFO sighting. To say I felt spooked would be an understatement. I got back into my car and drove the short 1,000 feet or so to get to my driveway and to the safety of my new home. I knew there were details I was not able to see because of the way the craft was illuminated. Then it dawned on me, nobody's gonna believe me. So, at 1:30 a.m. on a school night, I went into the house and scared my daughter and son by waking them up to witness what was in the sky. I hoped to God it would be there still, and sure enough, it was sitting right there where I left it. I am covered in goosebumps just recalling my daughter's reaction. My son was a huge skeptic, but even at the age of 12, when he witnessed it, looking back he knows what it was. I saw fear in his eyes. He stayed out with us for about a minute or two, then went back inside. My daughter and I were almost speechless. It was beautiful in a way, but we both agreed that it gave off a feeling of fear or dread, like we were not supposed to be seeing this. Then it struck me, I should get some binoculars. I happened to know right where they were because I did most of the boxing for our move. I grabbed the binoculars and was stunned at what I saw. The best I could describe it was it looked totally old on the bottom, like it was made from old clad iron ships long ago, pounded out metal, like with rivets and seams. The top looked very modern, I guess you could say. I remember it had something that resembled what I would call headlights on the back window, like some old cars. I also remember the top almost being shaped like a genie's lamp. My daughter looked through the binoculars and had a terribly similar description. Then I saw something that freaked me out even further. It now looked as though the craft was sitting on a long, thin, yellowish pedestal. I could not figure out what I was now seeing. I gave the binoculars to my daughter, by the way, she was 16 at the time, and asked her to explain to me what she saw at this time, what had changed. I could hear the absolute fright and quiver in her voice. I will never forget what she said, "Dad, there's a beam of light coming out from under whatever it is. I'm scared, Dad. I think we should go in." We could not shake that feeling of fright and the feeling that we should have never seen what we did that night. Both of our bedroom windows faced out directly where this craft could be seen. I found out later my daughter stayed up until morning on live video chat with her friends, absolutely terrified. After showering, I laid in bed exhausted but overwhelmed by what we just saw. It was at this point that I noticed the craft was moving, but at such a slow rate it was undetectable until I was able to compare it to something stationary, which was my vertical windowsill. I will never forget that dull, eerie, pale yellow light this craft illuminated. I forgot to mention that if you held out your arm, the craft was just slightly larger than the width of your thumb, if that makes any sense. I was told later that that is quite large. Eventually, the craft traveled out of sight, and I crashed from exhaustion. All started with a camping trip. Me and my girlfriend, let's just call her Lee, were young and dumb, blissfully unaware of the cosmic curveball life was about to throw our way. Picture this, crisp mountain air, crackling campfire, the Milky Way sprawled across the velvet darkness. Textbook postcard perfect. Except the postcard ripped in half when we woke up the next morning, disoriented, clothes rumpled, and with a gaping hole in our memories where the previous day should have been. We brushed it off as a weird shared dream, a glitch in the matrix, but a niggling unease settled in our gut, a premonition of things to come. Back in the familiar chaos of college life, things got weirder. Lee, normally the picture of health, started experiencing these unexplainable physical oddities, dizzy spells, nausea, heightened sensitivity to light. Then came the bombshell, pregnant. Impossible. She was on the pill religiously. The doctors were as confused as us, their tests revealing nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, as the weeks ticked by, the strangeness intensified. Lee's body became a battleground, her health fluctuating like a runaway roller coaster. One week she'd be glowing, energetic, the next, pale and listless. The baby inside her, meanwhile, seemed to be defying the laws of biology, growing at an alarming rate. The ultrasound session was disturbing. Before Lee and I knew what we were looking at, the technician ended the session. She seemed disturbed, leaving with no explanations given. Both Lee and I were beyond bewildered, bordering on desperation. My countless calls to the specialist's office only yielded the frustrating response, "The doctor is busy. He will call you back." But that call never came. Determined to uncover the truth hidden in those ultrasound images, I took matters into my own hands, parking myself near his car after his workday. The specialist was visibly shocked to find me there. There was no subtlety in my approach. I practically tried to force an answer from him. His bewildered expression shifted as he hesitated before urging, "Tell your wife to get an abortion." That's all I got from him, nothing more. His profound fear caught my attention. I couldn't fathom why he seemed so terrified about our baby's unusual condition. Then, the arrival of a black van nearby intensified his distress. His eyes fixated on it, and the fear seemed to double. As I left, deliberately passing close to the van, the driver's window lowered. Two men in suits and sunglasses shot me an eerie look. As the doctor drove away, the van started up, following him ominously into the unknown. The fear gnawed at me, a constant unwelcome companion. It was this creeping sense of being watched, a feeling like unseen eyes were tracking our every move. Then came that night in the apartment. We woke up, not to the comforting hum of the fridge or the distant sirens of the city, but to a bone-chilling silence, broken only by the frantic thumping of our hearts. In the inky blackness, a presence loomed, unseen but undeniable, radiating an oppressive dread that seeped into our very bones. I am telling you, that night there was more than us in that apartment. Only the Lord knows what that presence was, but it felt otherworldly. We fled that night, seeking refuge in Lee's parents' house, the unease clinging to us like a second skin. That's when I started getting anxiously suspicious about the gap in our memories from the night out camping in the wild. The pieces started falling into place, the strangeness of that event, the unexplainable pregnancy, the constant feeling of being watched. They all pointed towards something not of this world. The doctor's frantic insistence on more tests, his desperate pleas for termination. What further fueled my suspicion was that the doctor always had excuses not to see us or kept the sessions ridiculously short, never giving any clear answers to any of our questions. To myself, I wondered if it was his way to punish me for the time I creeped up to him in the parking lot, or if he was hiding something from us, possibly both. This wasn't a normal pregnancy. This was something else entirely. God knows what. Lee, bless her heart, refused to listen. Motherhood blazed in her eyes, a fierce determination that trumped logic and fear. She was going to have this baby, no matter what the test said, no matter what dark secret it held. Eventually, I decided it's better to let her live her naive dream. Denial can be bliss. I was hoping that she was right. I was hoping it was merely me being paranoid. If the baby was abnormal, we would have it anyway if that is what she wanted. The climax arrived like a sucker punch. Lee went into early labor, the doctors acting frantic, their faces etched with worry. Then came those two men in suits, their expressions unreadable, barring my entry to the delivery room like guardians of some forbidden secret. It was like they were hiding something terrifying. When they finally let me in, it was over. The baby, they claimed, died during the procedure. We never saw the body. Some fabricated story about a mix-up, an admin error. A wave of relief washed over me, an undeniable sensation despite the crushing grief clawing at my insides, a hollow echoing in my chest. Lee was devastated. It was slow, but time heals all, and she recovered. The years that followed were a haze: marriage, 3 beautiful, normal children, a life built on laughter and love. We tried to build normally and succeeded to a large extent. And that is our story. Yet it does not end there. Sometimes I wish it did. Ignorance would have been a simpler path. Something was off. Both of us shared nightmares, became our unwelcome souvenir. We never spoke of them, but the knowing glances confirmed our mutual torment. Weeks of normalcy could be shattered by a single morning, both of us awakening as if we'd relived that night in the wilderness every time, both of us at the same time. Its synchronized nature was disturbing. These random nightmares could come at any time. It couldn't continue. When our youngest, barely 5, noticed our erratic behavior, his innocent question cut deep: why are mommy and daddy in such a bad mood some mornings? Desperate for answers, we confided in a trusted psychologist. He suspected suppressed joint trauma and referred us to a hypnotherapist and her practice partner. Our separate but simultaneous sessions with the 2 hypnotherapists uncovered the horror. It all came out, or most of it in any case, or so we believe. Gosh, I think we would have preferred the amnesia. The memories were horrific: the oppressive silence of the woods, the sudden blinding light that filled our tent, the feeling of weightlessness as we were lifted skyward, the colossal metallic craft hovering silently above. Then came the figures themselves, tall and slender with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shimmer in the otherworldly light, their faces shrouded in shadow, radiating an unsettling calm. Their movements devoid of human emotion, their large almond-shaped black eyes, that is one thing that I can't get out of my mind since the regression sessions. And of course, those creepy 6-fingered hands touching everywhere. The details were terrifyingly clear: the sterile examination rooms, the cold metal instruments, the unsettling hums and piercing screams. We were not the only ones. They forced us apart. They controlled our bodies and movement. We were taken to separate rooms where we endured unspeakable experiments. From me, they extracted samples, a primal instinct telling me it wasn't what later transpired with Lee. For her, they did something far more monstrous, invasive, and unbelievable, manipulating her body and planting the unwelcome seed of that child. We didn't know their motives, but had to endure their cold touch and emotionless indifference. Emerging from the therapist's office, we clung to each other, trembling, tears mingling with the bitter sting of confirmation. Those fragmented memories finally coalesced into a horrifying whole, confirming our darkest suspicions. We weren't just abducted, we were subjects in some experiment, unwilling pawns in their grand design. Regular therapy sessions became our battleground, where we wrestled with the horrific memories and lingering trauma. Despite the semblance of normalcy we rebuilt, the shadows of our experience clung to the corners, whispers of what if clinging to the air. But the heaviest shadow loomed large: the baby, the one we lost. The burden became unbearable, a weight threatening to crush us both. I embarked on a mission for answers, tracking down the retired doctor across state lines in a Sarasota restaurant. Years etched on his face mirrored our own. He unveiled the truth: the 6-digit codes on tiny limbs, the oversized head, the huge black eyes like bottomless voids. Each unsettling detail chipped away at our hope, while the revelation of its survival, spirited away by shadowy figures claiming government affiliation, plunged us into a new abyss of fear and confusion. There's more to the story, secrets too unsettling to share in the open, but one even if the answers lead us deeper into the darkness. We received a chilling account from a brave individual who endured a harrowing encounter with enigmatic beings from another world. In this video, we delve into the spine-tingling story of their abduction and the shocking twist that left us questioning the nature of such abductions. I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to share an experience with you, something that happened to me one fateful night that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It was a late weekend night, and I found myself driving down a desolate stretch of road surrounded by farms and dense forestry. The full moon bathed the landscape in an eerie silver glow, and I was deep in the heart of nowhere. As I continued my journey, I noticed an unusual light in my rearview mirror. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was either another vehicle or the radiant full moon casting unusual shadows. However, my unease grew when a sharp beam of light suddenly engulfed my car. Panic coursed through my veins as my vehicle began losing power, the engine sputtering to a halt, and every electrical system shutting down. With trepidation, I stepped out of my car to investigate the source of this mysterious light. What I encountered next would defy all reason and logic: a flying saucer, yes, a UFO. The sight was unlike anything I had ever seen. It had landed right in the middle of the road. My heart raced as I watched in awe and terror as three small gray beings emerged from the craft. I know this might sound unreal, but the experience was real and simply terrifying. These beings were small, no taller than 3 feet, with slender bodies and a gray complexion. Their heads were disproportionately large, featuring oversized pitch-black almond-shaped eyes that shimmered with an otherworldly intelligence. They only had the slightest of noses and what seemed like slits for ears. Their mouths were also subtle lipless slits. Their fingers were long and delicate. These small but scary beings were clad in sleek, form-fitting bodysuits that bore an eerie jet-black hue. The fabric seemed to adhere closely to their diminutive frames, emphasizing their slender and otherworldly appearances. These suits appeared to be made of a material unlike any I had ever encountered, possessing a peculiar sheen that hinted at an advanced and unfamiliar technology. The texture of the suits had an almost metallic quality to them, adding to the otherworldly aura that surrounded these beings. It was as if these beings, dressed in their enigmatic black suits, were emissaries from a realm that defied human comprehension, leaving me with more questions than answers. As they approached me, walking with an uncanny grace, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, as if they were communicating with me through some form of telepathy. They moved in unison, their movements fluid and synchronized. Without uttering a word, they conveyed a sense of urgency, gently guiding me toward the entrance of their craft. It was as if they had the ability to exert control over my actions, making resistance futile. The hypnotic spell they cast upon me left me with no choice but to follow their lead, stepping through the metallic threshold of their enigmatic vessel and into an entirely new and unsettling reality. Inside the alien craft, I found myself in a room that defied any earthly description. The walls seemed to be constructed from a seamless silvery metallic material, casting an otherworldly shimmer across the entire chamber. There were no discernible corners or edges, creating an unsettling feeling of disorientation. The room was bathed in a soft bluish light that emitted from concealed sources, casting eerie shadows in every direction. In the center of the room lay a peculiar silvery metal slab, its surface smooth and polished to a mirror-like sheen. The slab had restraints of an unknown design, composed of a material that resembled a translucent gel-like substance. These restraints seemed to respond to the touch of the aliens, conforming perfectly to the contours of my body as they secured me in place. It was as if the slab itself was a living entity, adapting to their will. Surrounding the slab were an array of strange and intricate instruments, unlike anything found in human technology. Some emitted faint rhythmic hums, while others displayed holographic readouts that I couldn't comprehend. Tubes and wires snaked across the room, connecting to various devices, and it became clear that I was the subject of their experiments. The atmosphere was charged with an otherworldly energy, and my fear was palpable as I lay helpless on the metallic surface, unable to comprehend the full extent of what was about to transpire. The aliens surrounded me. While I was on the slab, one of them pulled down a mechanical arm with a kind of needle extending from it. He brought it towards my eyes. At first, I freaked out, but then my faith kicked in. As I am a spiritual person, I knew I had only one resort of help to turn to. It is because of my faith that I discovered a peculiar phenomenon. Every time I called out to my Creator and began to pray, something incredible happened. It was as if a divine presence filled the room, and I became certain that the Creator Spirit was with me. My prayers seemed to unnerve my captors, and I realized that my faith was a powerful weapon against them. Their fear was palpable, and it was evident that they were afraid of something far greater than themselves. It seemed to terrify them. With each prayer, they backed away, unable to withstand the spiritual force that protected me. As I continued to pray fervently, an astonishing and unexpected sight unfolded before my eyes. One of the little gray aliens, the one closest to me, suddenly exhibited signs of intense fear and distress. Its large, almond-shaped eyes widened even further, and it began to emit high-pitched, distressed sounds that I can only describe as a mixture of chattering and whimpering. In a shocking turn of events, the alien's body language conveyed sheer terror, and to my astonishment, it began to involuntarily urinate, causing its tight suit to become soaked with a pale liquid. The liquid pooled around its feet, creating a strange and unsettling scene within the sterile metallic chamber. It was as if my prayers had triggered a profound and unexpected reaction within the creature, revealing a vulnerability I could never have anticipated. This bizarre and surreal moment served as a reminder that, despite their advanced technology and seemingly superior knowledge, these extraterrestrial beings were not immune to fear. There were forces beyond their understanding that could instill terror even in the most enigmatic of creatures. It was a turning point in my harrowing ordeal, as I realized that my faith had the power to influence and protect me in ways I could never have imagined. In a twist of fate, they eventually released me, dumping me by the side of the road not far from where they had abducted me. As I watched their craft disappear into the night sky, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of awe and gratitude for the divine intervention that had saved me from an unimaginable fate. This experience has forever changed my perspective on the mysteries of the universe. It serves as a reminder that even in the face of the unknown and the terrifying, there is a force greater than anything we can comprehend, a force that shields us from the darkest of terrors if we turn towards it. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.